The England of the early 9th century was far from the unified nation we know today. Instead, it was a patchwork of rival kingdoms, each vying for supremacy. This period, known as the Anglo-Saxon heptarchy, saw 7 dominant kingdoms: Northumbria in the north, Mercia in the Midlands, Wessex in the south, and smaller but still significant realms like Kent, East Anglia, Sussex, and Essex. For centuries, Mercia had been the most powerful kingdom. Under kings like Penda and Offa, Mercia dominated southern England, enforcing its authority over neighboring territories, including Wessex. Mercia's influence extended even to the church, as its rulers controlled key ecclesiastical appointments. Meanwhile, Northumbria maintained its dominance in the north, known for its cultural and religious contributions, such as the Lindisfarne Gospels. Wessex, by contrast, was a smaller and relatively unremarkable kingdom, often overshadowed by its more powerful neighbors. But beneath this fragmented and unstable political landscape lay a simmering tension, a struggle for dominance that would eventually lead to a unified England. By the early 9th century, this balance of power began to shift. Mercia's dominance started to wane after the death of its most celebrated king Offa in 796. At the same time, the Viking threat loomed on the horizon, adding even more uncertainty to the region. Amid this turmoil, one man would rise from obscurity, transforming the fate of Wessex and laying the groundwork for the eventual unification of England. That man was Egbert of Wessex, a king whose journey from exile to dominance is as remarkable as it is pivotal in English history. Egbert of Wessex was born around 771 AD into a kingdom that was far from the dominant force it would later become. At the time, Wessex was a relatively small and often vulnerable kingdom in southern England, caught between the growing power of Mercia to the north and the influence of Kent to the east. Egbert was a member of the royal house of Wessex, descended from the legendary figure Cerdic, the semi-mythical founder of the kingdom. However, rivalries within royal families were common, and assassination or exile often awaited those who fell out of favor. In 786, Egbert's life took a dramatic turn. A political crisis erupted in Wessex following the death of King Cenulf. Egbert was a strong contender for the throne, but he faced a formidable opponent, Beorhtric, a rival supported by none other than Offa of Mercia, the most powerful king in England at the time. Offa's backing gave Beorhtric the upper hand, forcing Egbert to flee for his life. Egbert's exile marked the beginning of one of the most formative periods of his life. He sought refuge across the Channel in the court of Charlemagne, the great Frankish emperor. At the time, Charlemagne was one of the most powerful figures in Europe, ruling over a vast empire that stretched from modern-day France and Germany to Italy and beyond. For over a decade, Egbert lived in Francia, far from the political intrigues of Wessex. But his time in exile was far from wasted. Charlemagne's court was a center of learning, military innovation, and statecraft. Egbert was exposed to the strategies of one of history's greatest rulers, lessons that would prove invaluable when he eventually returned to Wessex. Charlemagne's empire was also facing challenges from the Saxons in the east and the Moors in the south. His years in Francia hardened him, shaping him into a man of resilience, patience, and ambition. Though the path back to Wessex seemed uncertain, Egbert never gave up on his dream of reclaiming his birthright. And in 802, after more than a decade in exile, fate finally turned in Egbert's favor. Beorhtric was dead, poisoned by his own wife. Egbert seized this chance and returned to Wessex to claim the throne. But his return was no triumphant parade. Wessex was not yet the powerful kingdom it would later become, and Egbert's path to securing his rule was fraught with challenges. Egbert's claim to the throne was legitimate, but his position was precarious. Wessex was surrounded by enemies, and its resources were limited. The neighboring kingdom of Mercia, though weakened, remained a significant threat under the rule of Cenulf. Egbert's first task was to solidify his rule within Wessex itself. Anglo-Saxon kingship relied on the loyalty of local nobles and the support of the people. To achieve this, Egbert implemented reforms to strengthen the administrative structure of the kingdom. One of Egbert's most important priorities was securing Wessex militarily. He focused on building a more unified and disciplined army, drawing lessons from his time in Charlemagne's court. But Egbert's ambitions were not confined to simply ruling Wessex. To truly secure his kingdom, he needed to confront Mercia, the dominant power in southern England. For decades, Mercia had imposed its will on Wessex, forcing it into a subordinate position. Egbert was determined to end this cycle of subjugation. For the first 20 years of his reign, Egbert carefully avoided direct confrontation with Mercia. Instead, he consolidated his power, strengthened his alliances, and patiently waited for the right moment to strike. His strategy paid off. While Wessex grew stronger, Mercia began to falter. The death of Cenwulf in 821 plunged Mercia into a period of instability, and Egbert saw an opportunity to challenge his old rival. In 825, after years of careful preparation and strategic consolidation, Egbert was ready to challenge Mercia, the kingdom that had long dominated southern England. His target was not just Mercia's dominance, but its very heart. This would lead to one of the most pivotal moments in Anglo-Saxon history, the Battle of Ellandun. The Battle of Ellandun took place near modern-day Swindon. Egbert faced Beornwulf, the king of Mercia, in a decisive confrontation. The battle was fierce, with heavy losses on both sides, but Egbert's tactical acumen and the morale of his troops ultimately turned the tide. By the end of the day, the Mercian army was routed and Beornwulf was forced to flee. This victory marked the end of Mercia's dominance and the beginning of a new era for Wessex. Egbert's victory at Ellandun reshaped the political landscape of England. He moved swiftly to consolidate his gains and took control of Kent, Sussex, and Surrey regions that had previously been under Mercian influence. Egbert's victory at Ellandun reshaped the political landscape of England. He moved swiftly to consolidate his gains and took control of Kent, Sussex, and Surrey regions that had previously been under Mercian influence. Egbert's influence now stretched from the south coast to the borders of East Anglia, cementing his status as a dominant ruler. In 829, he turned his attention northward, marching into Mercia itself and taking control of its capital. With Mercia subdued, Egbert set his sights on Northumbria, the last great independent kingdom. When Egbert's forces reached Northumbria, the northern kingdom chose submission rather than conflict. The Northumbrians pledged their loyalty to Egbert, recognizing him as their overlord. For a brief moment in history, Egbert held sway over all of Anglo-Saxon England, earning him the title Bretwalda, a term used in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle to describe an overlord of all the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. However, this unification was short-lived. Only a year after Egbert's conquest, in 830 AD, Mercia rose against Wessex's control. The Mercian nobility, deeply resentful of their subjugation, rallied behind a new leader, Wiglaf, who successfully reclaimed the Mercian throne. Egbert, recognizing the limits of his power and the challenges of maintaining control over a rebellious Mercia, withdrew without launching a large-scale campaign to retake the kingdom. This marked the end of Wessex's brief overlordship of Mercia, signaling the fragility of Egbert's unification. Egbert's reign coincided with the beginning of one of the most disruptive periods in English history, the Viking Age. By the late 8th century, Norse raiders had begun their infamous attacks on the British Isles, targeting monasteries, villages, and towns along the coast. In 836, Egbert faced a significant Viking threat. A fleet of Norse raiders landed in the southwestern part of his kingdom, likely in Devon or Cornwall. Egbert's forces engaged the invaders in battle at Carhampton. Although the Vikings were repelled, the encounter marked the beginning of a struggle that would persist for generations. Egbert's later years also saw him turn his attention to Cornwall, the westernmost part of modern England. At the time, Cornwall was a region inhabited by the Britons, who maintained a distinct culture and language, resisting Anglo-Saxon rule. In 838, Egbert faced a combined force of Cornish Britons and Viking allies at the Battle of Hengstone Down. Despite the formidable alliance, Egbert emerged victorious. This battle effectively brought Cornwall under Wessex's influence, marking another significant milestone in his reign. In 839, after a reign of 37 years, Egbert passed away. He was succeeded by his son Ethelwulf, who would continue the legacy of Wessex's dominance and its resistance against the Viking onslaught. Egbert was buried at Winchester, a city that would later become the heart of Anglo-Saxon England.